cut, welcome to the top cut, welcome to the top cut, welcome to the top cut. Top cut, welcome to the top cut, welcome to the top cut, welcome to the top cut.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Top Cut Yugioh podcast. My name is Giant Skyhawk, and Sunny is away for a week and a half. He's on vacation. He's gone on a cruise. So everyone say congratulations to Sunny. So this week, I've got another co-host on with me. They are a member of the necrofusion enthusiasts. quite the labber and theory crafter. I have Roto from the Discord. Say hello to the people, Roto.
Hello, everyone.
That'll do it. Okay, so to start off, I first want to thank our sponsors. So a massive shout outs to Steelfox Games and ETB Games. They are locals down in Sunny's neck of the woods. Both fantastic shops. As well, a massive shout out to Gem Accessories. They make fantastic deck boxes and backpacks. And a huge shout out to Dragon Shield as well. If you need custom size, Japanese custom size. If you need custom art, Japanese size sleeves. Those are now available at Dragon Shield. We've got an affiliate link in the description. And as all, if you hadn't seen on Twitter, Sunny posted theirs. I might put them up in the screen here. Sunny went with the normal summon Moyi bottom text. So those are very good. And then a massive shout out to all of our patrons as well. If you want to make us say very ridiculous things, the link to the Patreon is in the description, and then you can make your name whatever you want us to read at the end of the episode. So with that, would you like to introduce yourself to the people?
Yeah, hi. My name is Roto. I have played quite a few card games over the years. I think I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Proper around 2018, and since then I've played Pokemon TCG, I've played Magic. I have not played Digimon, but I was interested in it for a little bit, just seeing how that went. But yeah, aside from that, I'm just your average card game player and insane person.
I think you have to be a little bit crazy to dive into a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! It's with all the complexity discussion that we've had kind of recently. Oh, yeah. It really feels like everybody is. It really feels like everybody is kind of slowly realizing how crazy we all are for learning this nonsense pile of a game. So speaking of nonsense pile of a game, when you started playing, what was the first deck that you ended up playing? What sucked you into learning how the ins and outs of Yu-Gi-Oh go?
So 2018, for those of you who do remember, was infamous for Firewall Dragon. So the first deck that I picked up, because I thought it was extremely funny, was Firewall Extra Link Blackwings.
Okay. Well, hold on. How does... I've never actually heard of this. How does this deck work? It was just... Well, I mean...
the idea...
Gofu was legal, right?
It wasn't just that Gofu... Well, Gofu was banned by this point.
Oh,
it's
okay. It was banned.
Way before Firewall came in. It was just that you had a bunch of guys that summoned themselves from hand, and you had Black Whirlwind to just get 2 cards from deck, and then there was a bunch of other stuff that you could do. So the idea was that you would just Firewall Dragon to cycle everything on the field and try and make an extra link.
I love that. It is so funny because that was like a period of time in the game when I was taking a break. Every time I hear of lists that people were playing, then I can't help but laugh. I mean, this was the time when Konami was like, no, actually, we need to limit A Assault Core. That's the problem card.
to say it was like a dark time for the ban list is such an understatement.
Yeah.
There's not only the A Assault Core limit, which was kind of ridiculous, but it's just the fact that there was just so much ridiculous stuff you could do with Firewall Dragon, and they decided the correct hit for about a year was to put it to 1 so that you couldn't loop multiple of them to do ridiculous setup combos. It was genuinely the old what was it? I think it was the Earth Elemental Lord was not once per turn or something.
Grand Soil.
Yeah, Grand Soil had an errata because of Firewall Dragon, because it was just not once per turn. So you could just eternally keep bouncing it to summon more Firewall Dragons.
Oh, are you
I
thinking?
think that's what
Is it the
was.
Elemental Lord, or are you thinking of Grinder Golem?
No,
No,
no, this was
it
the
is
Elemental Lord. This was just because Grinder Golem did it as well.
right.
That was the thing, that because Grinder Golem was doing it. Grinder Golem didn't get to do it in the TCG because we banned Grinder Golem before Security Dragon came
Yeah.
out. But you could still bounce a couple of cards, still make a Firewall Dragon, but you couldn't do the full funny of like summon it, make Akashik, make Security Dragon, make Firewall, bounce it again, get like 8 link materials off a single card.
So
But you could still do like ridiculous stuff with Firewall when it was like at 3 and everything was just untouched.
yeah, and and you decided to stick around after experiencing this.
I took like a 3-month break as soon as Firewall got banned because it was
Right.
just Dark Warrior.
Yeah.
And then as soon as like the salad structure that came in and we got into like Toss proper, that's when I really picked up the game. I picked up Lunalight immediately after, I think, and started doing Azathoth, the Azathoth lock.
Yeah.
But I stuck with Lunalight for I think the entire year.
What's interesting about that is I feel like our timelines are actually pretty similar. Like I was around the game for a lot longer, just like as a casual player, and I played like to put into perspective how like TOS format ish was also when I started taking the game like seriously. I was playing the same Dino Rabbit list for like 8 years. Before TOS format, like I was playing one rabbit, Dino Rabbit, probably up until Rabbit went to 3. I was not playing the dinosaur structure deck cards until like maybe 2 years after that structure deck came out. Like that's how bad I was for like an unbelievably long time. So TOS was when I started like really playing more seriously. So I feel like that range of time, I feel like there's like a kind of a generation of us that grew up with competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, and that was our landscape, and that's kind of what we compare everything to.
Yeah, I think that's why there's such a fondness for like TOS format, is because a lot of people got started with Salamangre and Orcust and like Lunalight. Maybe not so much Striker because that deck was actually fairly expensive still, but there was just a lot of cards where it was like, this deck is insanely cheap. You build the entire thing for like, what, 50-ish?
Yeah.
And it's like you have a fully playable competitive deck that you can just play.
Yep. And Thunder Dragon was kind of on the expensive side, I think, too. But anybody, if you had a bunch of the old
money, but
if you had a bunch of the old dragon stuff, then you could probably build that deck. Not too bad. Although Chaos Emperor, the prize card, kind of made that a little tricky closer to the end of it. I guess I'll just go over just some like quick Yu-Gi-Oh kind of general questions so we can get your thoughts out on these ones. What would you say is probably your favorite deck of all time? Like, what's the thing you always come back to?
Oh god. Well, probably Fluffle. Honestly.
I feel like that's the answer for a lot of the Necrofusion enthusiasts Discord people. Is like we abandon the deck sometimes to play other stuff, but we always just come back to Penguin.
Yeah, it's just this deck has like 30 different custom cards, and they all read like insane, but the deck is still somehow like one step from playability eternally.
Pretty much, yeah. We have to move heaven and earth to get it to do anything, but it's fun trying to move mountains. So it's kind of how I would describe building it. Okay, so that's the number one. How about what would be your least favorite deck? What's the stuff that you just hate to play against?
If I'm setting up to an event and I don't want to play against something, it like right now it's probably Cash, because of like just the cards surrounding Cash and what Cash is attempting to do. Like right I think cash has changed a lot from how it was pre-ban list, where it was just a Rise Heart pass plus a bunch of unfair staples.
Right.
Now it is just Fenrir pass with a bunch of unfair staples.
Yeah.
It is very much less. I don't like. It's less that I don't like playing against specific decks. I don't like playing against a specific genre of card. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I wonder if we can guess what that is.
Could
Yeah.
could it rhyme with schmingering schmudgates? 'Cause
I mean, it can rhyme with Schmudgates and would be good.
yeah, that's fair.
In general, that genre of card where you go, I activate this card. I have now won the duel functionally. You know, Cash plays a lot of those. Lab plays a lot of those. Sprite not so much. Sprite just kind of is able to brute force its way through everything.
Yeah, really the closest Sprite gets is like summoning Thunder King Ryo or the end of Anubis off of Mannequin Cat. Like, we're not really...
Oh yeah, like...
But it does feel like... I definitely hear what you're saying, where it feels like we have a lot of formats that are really, really close to being good, but then we just have a bunch of these crappy auto-win cards that make a lot of games miserable out of the sideboard, and even decks that don't naturally have necessarily have a great way to play them will do it, like Sprite with the Mannequin Cat targets. Like, they were summoning Tetsudo, Eret, and Newman off of that for a long time, and like, if that's how deep down the rabbit hole we have to go for auto wins, I feel like something has to be adjusted at that point, right?
Yeah, it was particularly bad during like the pre-Verte ban, where every deck that was any deck was setting up Dag the Verte, make DPE, pop the Scythe, and that was just an instant win, and like it wouldn't even resolve a majority of the time because people were playing specific outs to it. But when you're dealing with stuff like that, and then you're dealing with like an Eldritch player that's just playing Cyber's card to do Dag the Verte, and then they also end on like 3 floodgates. It just no, I don't. I'm gone. I'm done.
The problem with the available counterplay to those cards, right? So it to me, it's always about reasonable counterplay. Like, let's take another example that both Cash and Lab are playing now. Actually, I think Cash wasn't doing this for a while, and a lot of players are now. Is Eradicator Epidemic Virus. The available counterplay to that card, if you are going second, there are, unless you're playing a fairy deck and you can play like Purple Light, there are 2 cards, Crossout Designator and Cypher Gear Epsilon. Crossout Designator sucks because not only is it like the crappiest 1-for-1 trade ever, you have to now play an additional specific target in your side deck, and you probably have to build your deck around Crossout if you want to play around EEV, and then the rest of your hand has to beat everything else. Kind of like your point with Verte Scythe, where you have to have both the out to this specific card that you can't really search, and also that. And then there's Cypher Epsilon, which... is not necessarily reasonable to be playing in a side deck specifically for one normal trap card in exactly game 2 or game 3. And it's a card that against a lot of other matchups doesn't really do anything because either it's like floodgates that don't matter, or there are a lot of decks even that can't really deal with the monster on board. Something like Branded, for example, playing Epsilon would be like really neg. Like, you can't really do anything with the materials afterwards. So when the available counterplay sucks, and you can even extend that to the floodgates, right? Like, it goes in matches stuff like a lot of decks don't have good in-engine outs to these cards, and it sucks that you end up in a situation where the game is just kind of over when they get flipped if there's no like Twin Twisters in the hand.
Yeah. I will say this is the exact same with Droll and Lockbird, except people defend that card because, but Drytron exists and Infernoble. Does Infernoble add? Like, not that much. But it's you point to the worst case example with Droll, and people are just like, yeah, well, that worst case example exists, so it's fine. But it's still the same thing of the available counterplay sucks, especially because now the available counterplay is a limited card, a limited card, a semi-limited card, and Crossout Designator.
Yeah, and the thing too is, especially with Gamma, like, I like Gamma is a ridiculous card. The value that you can get off of a well-timed Gamma is just truly ridiculous, going first or second. The problem is, Gamma was necessary to counter stuff like Droll or Dimension Shifter, as like a reasonable like amount of counterplay. The problem is they didn't ban the cards that Gamma was necessary to counter at the time that they limited Gamma. So you end up in this crappy situation where Dimension Shifter is now kind of ruling the format, even though Cash is less represented than it was at the height of its popularity. So,
Well,
yeah,
I don't even know that's the case. It's definitely like ruling the format, but it's not like people aren't playing it, but it still rules the format because the top 3 decks are all decks that can play either into Shifter or into like an Arise Heart. If your deck can like play into Macrocosmos, it's already going to automatically be good. And even the stuff that's like on the fringe still has ways to play into that. So if your deck just doesn't have a way to play into Macrocosmos, you just kind of lose. And it's a real slap in the face when in the middle of like Telement format, the answer was we'll put Macro and Die Fighter.
Yeah, we're gonna
because the moment we leave that format, suddenly these cards are now going to be annoying and a problem. Similar to this format where I've decided that I am on a crusade against Dimension Shifter because it's not a problem now, but it will just forever be a problem.
The problem is Shifters in the rarity collection, so we're probably not getting it banned. This is a complete side note, but Roto and I did actually get the chance to meet at YCS London a couple months back. So that was a ton of fun, and I'm gonna put it on camera here. Roto did send me back with a copy of Rotom. Yep. So I've got the Rotom on screen here.
Yeah, I gave a bunch of Rotoms out. It was really, really funny. I think Scarlon got one, MBT got one, and I was like a little absolute goblin running away from him because I just gave him one and just left. I got one delivered to Fafa, and I immediately got a message back wait, Rotom's a Pokemon.
You tell me Fafa didn't know what Rotom was? That's crazy.
Yeah, I think. Hang on, I'll send you this after the call. But I have screenshots of me going like I didn't realize Rotom was a Pokemon and showing the entire Rotom collection that I have.
That is incredible. That is so funny. Okay, so speaking of Rotom, the other game that you play pretty heavily is the Pokemon TCG. I have like learned the rules of that game from like playing it super casually with my brothers as a kid, but it is a game that I have not really dived into that much. Like I see Tatsum has been playing it a lot. Two of my good friends, Caitlin and Luna, play the Pokemon TCG. But I have almost I have very little background on kind of the style of game and where it's at. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was really the only TCG I've ever given a deep dive into. So what got you into the Pokemon TCG and how is it different from Yu-Gi-Oh?
I got into the Pokemon TCG. This one's pretty easy because it was just like I had a friend that played and it was on a Monday when I was off. So I was just like, yeah, sure. It's like somewhere I can go. And then as I changed and my life kind of changed, I wasn't able to make Mondays anymore and I kind of fell out for a bit, and then I've recently dived back in because of Pokemon TCG Live, despite how terrible that simulator is. But like Pokemon's a lot different because how do I put this? Pokemon seems like it would be a game where it's a lot less consistent, considering you have 6 cards from your deck that are just completely removed from the game until you like start doing things, but it is more consistent than Yu-Gi-Oh, and that's really saying something. There's just so many cards in the game where it's like, oh well, I can discard 2 cards and then add any Pokemon, and that Pokemon then fetches a supporter, and then I use my supporter, I drop my hand and I draw 7 cards, and we just go again. I think the one of the best decks in the format right now, which is God of War EX, has 4 copies of Curlier, and the Curlier just reads discard a card, draw 2. Not hard ones per turn or anything. And then you just put a God of War on top of it, and you just go, cool, I've discarded a bunch of energy. I can now forward. Imagine like energy is like lands from Magic.
Yeah.
You need them to attack. So you just discard all this energy with Curlier, cycle through your entire deck, and then use God of War to smack it all on top of a God of War and just hit for big damage. Because in reality, all decks just hit for big damage, but the way that they set up that big damage is different.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, there's I think the example most people may have run into if they've looked into it is I think it's Bill or Professor Oak or something from like base set or like a really old set that just says draw 7. And it's like, you read those cards and you think that they're crazy, but I know Pokemon, it's like you can only play 1 supporter per turn. And then any of the other trainer cards are just like whatever you want.
Yeah, so around the Black and White era, there was a massive rule change where they reformatted the entire card because everything was like a mess. So they reformatted everything, so it's just you have supporters, which are your hard ones. You get 1 of these per turn, unless you're going first, in which case you get none of them. And then you have all of your item cards, which you can just play as many of those as you want. You have your Pokemon tools, which are now their own separate thing, as well as tool supporters, items. And that's basically the 3 main categories of card, but then you've also got Pokemon, and those Pokemon can have abilities, and the abilities can be like, Pokemon take 20 less damage to search your deck for a supporter, and then like, or look at the top 3, attach any energy, your turn ends. I think the funniest one to bring up is like, whenever you bring up the Pokemon TG is to bring up the ban list. Because it's the ban list for expanded, which is their non-rotating format, is the most ridiculous thing. Because you read some of these cards and it's like, how was that printed, or why is that good?
Yeah, I should read through that sometime. Actually, that would be a funny idea.
It is peak comedy. You have stuff where it's like Chip Ice Axe, where it is a one-time use Goddess Skull's Oracle, and that card's banned. And you have, Shaman EX, where it's just, when you play this, draw until you have 6. It's not hard ones, so you can keep bouncing it and playing it and cycle through your entire deck multiple times.
Disgusting.
Or, the funny one is that two different unknowns are banned because they were both used for FTKs.
Very, very silly. How do you... Hold on. Okay, how do you FTK in... this is maybe a side tangent. How do you FTK in Pokemon? Because I know there's the win condition, for those who don't know. There are prize cards, and you get prize cards for... You get your prize cards back, like you lay 6 out at the beginning of a match. And you get... when you knock out an opponent's Pokemon, you get one of your prize cards. And then sometimes there are some, like, I think EX Pokemon or Level X Pokemon where you get 2 or 3 prize cards for knocking those out. How does one FTK? Are there cards that, like, just let you take prize cards, or like, set up
so
for
specifically
knockouts?
these two unknown read, if you do thing, you may use this ability, and if you do, you win the game. Unknown Hand says if you have... Unknown Hand says if you have 35 or more cards in your hand, you win the game. And Unknown Damage says if you have... Unknown Damage says if there is 66 or more damage counters on your bench Pokemon, you win the game.
Why would you ever print a card that says that? Because, like, at some point you print that and then you're like, no, it's fine. Nobody's ever actually going to be able to do this. It's kind of like it's like Cannon Soldier, right? Where Konami prints Cannon Soldier way back in ancient times and is like, surely nobody can use this to win the game in one turn. And then Magical Scientist happens and they're like, Oops. Sorry, guys. I imagine that's what happened with the unknowns, where other stuff just eventually was built up so that you could abuse them.
Nope, these were printed and immediately broken.
Okay. That gives me a lot of faith.
No, like let me just tell you now. I think 70% of the Pokemon TCG ban list is banned because there was one deck that went around constantly and just hand looped you for 7 turn 1.
I love that. That's super fun.
It's silly.
Okay, so with the ban list, this probably is a good segue. So you mentioned there's I don't remember what you mentioned it was called, but it's the not rotating format. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Only very expanded. Okay, yeah. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game that has only very recently been just like dipping its very, very tiny tippy toes into having different formats. Like we just had the big Edison event, but really the Edison event is like not even really an alternative format. It's more of a historical one. So it's the same advanced format, just set in a different time period. But so Pokemon is a game that has rotation, and we can get into rotation discussion afterwards. But what does because I've only ever really, my exposure to it super limited. I've only ever really seen the one main rotation format being played. Is Pokemon like Magic where it has all these formats, or is it just like kind of a couple bigger ones? Like what's the setup there?
So realistically, you have exactly standard, where people will only play standard a majority of the time.
Yeah.
There is like a decent sized expanded community, but it's nowhere near the size of like standard, because standard is so pushed on Pokemon TCG Live, on Pokemon TCG Online. When that was around, it was massively pushed on there.
Yeah.
Like most events are just playing standard. So the expanded community is like very niche in comparison to just everyone playing the regular format. But expanded's still like a thing you can kind of do, even though TCG Live has kind of decided that no, we don't want to do rotation, or we don't want to do expanded now. And aside from that, you have like the only other official format is unlimited, and nobody plays it because it just says every card is legal.
Right. It's kind of like traditional format where it's like it's always on the Forbidden and Limited list, but nobody actually like does anything with it because it's just awful.
yeah. It is like because you get to play all of the cards from 1990 whatever, where they just read draw 3, and they're all treated as item cards.
That's. I love that they bake into the rules. Actually, we're going to make it worse. That's very funny. So that actually makes obviously they're very different games, but that actually makes for an interesting comparison. So one debate that is happening, partially spurred on by MBT series, but also spurred on by just kind of the situation in Yu-Gi-Oh right now in general is a debate about rotation. So it is cool that you mentioned that Pokemon like has other formats but really only has the one format, which makes it an interesting parallel to Yu-Gi-Oh, where Yu-Gi-Oh is a non-rotating game, but it also has the same issue where it's only got the one format. So what do you think about the possibility of rotation in Yu-Gi-Oh from your experience as somebody who's dealt with it in Pokemon? Is it something that you think could work? Is it something that you think you'd rather Yu-Gi-Oh go the Magic route, or would you rather they go the Pokemon route and just have the one format with rotation? I don't know if it sounded like before we started that you had some thoughts about this.
Yeah, I don't like rotation. As someone who has played Pokemon like extensively, rotation just doesn't work for what a lot of people think that it does, where it's like, oh, it's this solution where you put it into the game and it makes the card pool refresh, and so you get fresher experiences and you get like less power creep. It does not work that way. You get like I think the best one to point out is there was a deck that came out in Fusion Strike called Mew VMAX, where it would just like you put a guy on your like front, you draw 6 cards a turn, like 4 times a turn. You would like punch for like a massive amount of damage, and then you could boost it up so you could just hit everything. It was like a really good deck. So their solution was to, instead of banning it, they just let it exist and then print Drapion EX, which basically reads, if your opponent is playing Mew VMAX and they cannot out this card, they lose. And it's just like,
Yeah.
So it's a dark type that has a lower attack cost if your opponent has Fusion Strike Pokemon or Single Strike or Rapid Strike. I think that's the text. And then it does 190, but because it's a dark type, it's doubled against specifically Mew. So it's able to hit the Mew VMAX in one go, which then gives up 3 prizes because the VMAXs specifically give up like 3. So they just print answers to specific cards where they like become a problem. Oh, we'll just print an answer to it. I hope you're love playing this format for 3 months. I think in the time that I played Pokemon TCG, they banned a total of like 6 cards. Because they was just like, oh, this card is like obviously ridiculous, or this card is like obviously just does not work. I think the best one was like Blaine's quiz, where it was like, oh yeah, this doesn't work at events because if you have different language cards, your opponent has to try and guess what card that is, and they can't if they don't know the language. So there's stuff like that, and then there's just stuff like, oh, well, we'll just print bigger and better cards. Like you had EXs where it was just like capital E, capital X, and it's like, oh, well, these have 2 prizes, but they've got 180 health and they do damage. And then you've got GXs where it's like, oh, these have got like 250 health and they do a lot of damage. And then you have like this constant escalating values of health and what they do and all this and that. And it just gets out of hand really quickly.
Yeah.
It just, in general, just doesn't work. I think when people ask for rotation Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't think people want that. Especially because MBT, from what I recall, played Modern, which is the non-rotating format, not Standard. Like, Standard just kind of sucks. Less because of like, oh, well, my cards will rotate once every 2 or now 3 years. And more because, oh, well, this doesn't solve the problem of a power creep. Magic has had to ban more cards in recent years than ever before as well. It just doesn't fix cards being way too powerful and like having massive power creep. It either accelerates that timeline because you need to print answers or print bigger and better things because everything sticks around for enough time where it's like relevant, but not enough time where you have to care about it. And realistically, like, I think what MBT is doing is interesting, but I think ultimately it's just better that we just get more battle packs. Just give us an official draft format, and I think most people would probably be satisfied with that.
Right. Yeah, it is kind of wonky. So I think it's tough because I went back and forth with Siberian Rabbit about some rotation stuff as well. I think probably in an ideal universe where designers don't make like absurd mistakes, that rotation might be ideal. Just because like you can do something like Magic where there's multiple formats that gets balanced around. So if there's one format that sucks, you can always bounce around to a different one. Whereas I definitely take your point that as someone who's not so experienced with the game, Pokemon hasn't really been able to avoid the power creep problem, despite being a rotation game almost exclusively, where stuff still ends up having more HP, attacks do more damage, cards do more things. Like I think increasing complexity is something that is very difficult to avoid, even in a rotation game, without just printing the same cards over and over again nonstop. Like in order to keep existing players engaged, I feel like you do have to introduce that complexity. Yu-Gi-Oh, however, has had the problem where there's way too much complexity. Like I feel like that's something Pokemon has done well, where card effects are not like insanely confusing to parse, and a lot of the mechanics, like the status conditions and stuff, are stuff that already exists in the game franchises. So there's not as much of a learning curve for people who are experienced with the franchise. Whereas with Yu-Gi-Oh, watching the show or playing the games really just does not do a service to what the game is. I can't. Somebody is like,
I wish I could say that was true, but then you have like ridiculous stuff where it's like I think Lugia is the best example of this. Lugia V Star, and you'll notice that Pokemon likes to make a problem for itself by printing cards that reference specific mechanics and then rotating out those mechanics so that you have other cards that come in and then abuse those tools. The best example was Bridget, which says you can put either a Pokemon EX on your bench or 3 Pokemon that aren't EXs. And then they just printed GXs, and because they're not EXs, they you get to put 3 of them on your bench. It was very funny.
That's
for like the longest time.
Okay, so that just feels to me like a design mistake. Like, I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, I guess it's kind of a flaw in rotation, but you'd think you'd be like, okay, we can't introduce this thing until like X cards are rotated out, so we don't reference stuff. But then it's hard because it's like then after like a gap in time, people might notice like, hey, we're not printing support for this like mechanic, so that means it's probably going to be completely done soon. Maybe I'm going to start unloading stuff. I guess kind of you put the I'm not really too much of a market guy, but you put the market for cards in kind of a weird situation. So the one thing I do know is that Pokemon is like just significantly cheaper to play, to pick up competitive decks in general. I know rotation is a thing where you have to like be constantly picking up new stuff, but like getting an actual deck is cheaper. So what do you think either system is better? Do you think there could be improvements from Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon on the pricing front?
I'm gonna say that while Yu-Gi-Oh does have its problems in terms of pricing, Pokemon is not all smiles and sparkles as it seems to be. Tatsim's been on like a massive one about this, like recently, because the 2 best decks in the format are God of War and Lost Box. God of War is like $40, Lost Box is like $60. Those decks are insanely cheap because it is like 60 commons. These decks are incredibly low rarity and contain like no high rarity generic cards. If anyone played during this early Sun and Moon era, there was a card called Tapu Lele GX, which was effectively mandatory because it was a good attacker and it had an insane ability and could be played in everything. So because of those 3 factors, for the normal rarity version, bear in mind it had 3 rarities. You had the normal rarity, you had the full art, and you had the rainbow rare. This card was $50 for the normal rarity, and you needed anywhere from between 2 and 4 for like a year. It was insanely expensive to play. It was quite literally more expensive than Yu-Gi-Oh at points, because of just the sheer amount of stuff that you needed. Where it was like, oh well, you need Tapu Lele, and then you need like Zoroarks and Buzzwoles, and they're all like $5 to $10 a pop. So it's like Pokemon isn't always the cheapest game. It can sometimes be quite expensive. Not to downplay Yu-Gi-Oh having the problem of we printed Forbidden Droplet at Secret Rare, have fun, or we printed Barone in a side set at Ultra, have fun.
Yeah.
These cards are now mandatory for like until they get reprinted.
With Droplet,
but it's like, definitely an issue.
Yeah, with Droplet, they were like, "Hey, we reprinted the card, but also we shorted it, and
secret,
and it's also a secret rare again."
Yeah, yeah,
like that. I hate that stuff. Like, it just feels so unnecessary. Like we could have like even. So it sounds like even with Pokemon, even though it's not all sunshine and rainbows, I feel like the ceiling is still usually lower, and the floor is usually lower for like some stuff. Like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, like eventually all decks are cheap, right? That's something that Yu-Gi-Oh is actually reasonably good at compared to other games. Is that eventually the deck cores are not expensive. There are maybe like a couple of exceptions. Madolche is like perennially expensive for no reason. But most of the time, decks that fall out end up not being expensive forever. Whereas a Pokemon maybe, while something is good in a rotation, it's just going to be expensive until it gets rotated out. I
mean, the thing with expanded is that it is just standard 2. It's just standard with the old cards usually. There's a couple of exceptions, like Dragonite being legal and like really good because double dragon energy exists and a whole bunch of other like situational stuff exists. But generally, like Pokemon just has standard and standard 2.
Got it. All right, I'm gonna hit you with one last big question. Before we hit the outro here, because it sounds like as somebody who's experienced with both games.
Connection just crapped out there for a moment.
Oh, all good.
Still bad?
I can still hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, sick. I'm gonna hit you with one last kind of big question surrounding the two games. Now that we've had the kind of the rotation discussion, not all sunshine and rainbows. So. You have now been put in a very funny position. You've inherited a shocking amount of money, and you've used some of it to end up as a member of the board on both a Nintendo Game Freak board and the Konami board, and you can make one change.
Hang on, that again.
Oh, okay, all good. What was the last thing you caught from me?
You've inherited a bunch of money.
Okay, I'll start from there then. Okay, so you've inherited a bunch of money for no reason, and you've bought your way onto the boards of Game Freak Nintendo and Konami, and you can make, but for some reason you're only there for like 2 days. Who cares? Basically, I've done the whole preamble. It doesn't mean anything. You can make one like major change to Pokemon and one major change to Yu-Gi-Oh. If you have, so what do you think would be the biggest thing that both games could change that would improve their situation?
I mean, for Pokemon TCG, like the game realistically isn't gonna change without like long-term. Like removing the kind of incentive for people to just buy like a bunch of product and then like for collection purposes. Like that's always going to exist and that's always going to make them money, and it's like, who cares? The one thing that I would pump money into is like from Nintendo standpoint is TCG Live, because that is the number one thing I think that's like good about the Pokemon experience. If you want to pick up cards and play in real life, go ahead, but your best simulator is the worst simulator on the market. It by far, it is horrifically bad. It is like terrible.
Yeah, I've heard people say that like even with all the complaints about Master Duel, and there are many like very good and legitimate ones. Ugh, Maxi. I've heard a lot of people be like, especially I've seen Chaotic Meatball on Twitter be like, y'all have no idea how good you have it because TCG Live is just so bad. And there was the bit going around where like there were some game-breaking bugs that were screwing up the meta, so people had to build a deck to counter the bugs. I don't know. Is that like? Would you say that's a fair summary of how bad Live is?
So Pokemon TCG Live is like if you took everything bad about Master Duel and everything bad about Duel Links and everything bad about Arena, and you combine them all together. It's got buggy set releases, so you will have sets that will come out, and then you will have a laundry list of cards that get banned because there are significant game-breaking bugs with them. You'll log in, you'll do your dailies, you'll get enough for a 6 of 1 pack, and then you will log out until the next season hits. In order to get enough gems to buy the battle pass, you have to grind dailies eternally. Because they give you different currencies, because they have like 5 different currencies in that game, and they barely give you anything of anything. To make the deck that you want, you're expected to buy codes. That is it. Like, everyone says that the code system is fun. It is not. It is a pain putting in codes. It is a pain getting a hold of codes. It is a pain just like dealing with the whole code system. Even now they've added crafting to the game. If you want to craft a card, you need credits, and to get credits, you basically pull dupes. You cannot dismantle cards for credits. If you craft something and don't like it, it's not like Muscle where you can just uncraft it and get some of the credits back. You just can't uncraft it. So it's just hope that you pull more of that card.
That's rough.
And then not only that, but also the main ladder is standard. So the competitive ladder that you actually earn rewards from is standard and nothing else. And then the expanded ladder is expanded, except it's missing half the card pool because it doesn't include X and Y or black and white cards. It
seems like a good game.
It's just bad. Considering as well how insane Master has been for onboarding players, ignoring like the format, because the format will eventually change, even if Max C is not going to go away, even if this and that, right? Master was a case of bad format, good simulator. If you want to introduce people to Yu-Gi-Oh! And like modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's at a point now where the game will show you most of the stuff you need, and then like the ladder will show you everything else, and then you can take the basic knowledge and then bring it over to the TCG. Whereas like you can't bring everything over. Like,
right. Yeah, that makes sense. So
what you think is a good effect. But like TCG Live has none of that. It has no player onboarding process.
Crazy. I might have to lay off a Master Duel a little bit. Hearing that is truly horrifying. So then I guess that leaves the subject of the podcast then, Yu-Gi-Oh! If you could give it one major change, do you have any ideas?
In terms of major changes to like the TCG, I think aside from the long-term stuff of you just take all of the floodgates and you take them behind a shed and you kill all of them, and you kill all of the instant win buttons, because that's not realistic. It's just going to take either an infinite number of lists, like Konami's not going to do it. Mm-hmm. The one thing is just make a draft set. Make draft an actual thing again, because people enjoy draft. And well, draft in general is just a good experience. You can put like alt rarity cards. Do the rarity collection thing where you put like the Japanese secret rares or the Japanese collectors packs, and then just like say, hey, here's a draft set that you can play with your friends, and we're also doing this at events. So if you want to tag along, and like, yeah, just make draft like an official thing. And I think make draft the thing and make it like rewarding, and then make people able to access draft outside of events. And I think that genuinely would be one of the things that like shoots Yu-Gi-Oh! Into like insane tier popularity.
It would be a good way to do like alt formats on top of being able to sell product. Yeah. Because like I've seen people talk about stuff like an Edison booster or like an Edison set, and I think that would be awesome. But something like a draft format, I think it gives you more openness to like kind of modern reprints. You can combine a lot of stuff into those sets where you can do like high-powered staple reprints and rarity upgrades and like reprints of old cards that need them. So I definitely agree. I think it would be cool to see something like Battle Pack where it's designed for draft, but it also has the capacity to serve as a reprint set. That's a super great point. All right. Well, I think that is going to do it for this. So I'm going to read out the patron names and be prepared, because some of these will not make sense to you and some of them are just ridiculous on their face. So massive thank you to our patrons. A huge shout out to Bring Red Reboot Back to 3. No. Kane Martin, Zyphorus.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, exactly. Big Stinky, Zyphorus, in case I missed you. Broken Boy 13, Ding Dongs, Hostess of the Yangzing, to Hostess is a brand of kind of like
Come on,
cake.
Discord.
Oh, are you
I heard Big Stinky, and then the connection just cut. I love that.
Okay, all right. So we got Big Stinky, Broken Boy 13, Ding Dongs, Hostess of the Yangzing, which is Hostess is an American cake like kind of brand. They do like snacks and stuff, and there's a snack called Ding Dongs. So when Danglong came off the list, we got Ding Dongs. Earth Machine Best Deck. Has anyone actually read Toy Vendor? HZH Cyber. I used to play Rogue, but then my mom got a job. Is Canada Nickelback? John Leal, Mountain Man. Oatmeal Spaghetti, Owen Alvarado. Pistol RX, Silver Hope. Sonny stole my phone and took pictures with a Mo Yi body pillow. There is one rule and only one. Always read MISC. Understanding and reading are two different things. Upstart Goblin D's Nuts. Virtually Savior's World. Zach M. Aaron Gardner. Alexander Chan. Asami. Ashless Chaps. Atsuyo, Simp of the Silver Castle. Blackwing Silverwind the Ascendant is the best floodgate. This person has had this name for such a long time, and I'm slowly being converted. Maybe it is the best floodgate. Box Wine, Co-Link D's Nuts, Come On and Get Your Game On, Duty Booty, Dragon Maidenless Behavior, I'm About to Rika Glamour Tribute for Cost D's Plant Nuts in Your Mouth, Neshi, Old Man Red, Pin Code 143, Sakitama, Aratama, Nikitama, Cam, Obama, and Slaking It Up. Thank you all very much for your support of the podcast. Roto is letting me know that Roto cannot hear me because Discord is ridiculous.
I am back.
Oh,
I am
Roto is
finally
back.
This app, I swear, $1 million company cannot make stable connections somehow.
True, that's fair. So I guess you missed most of the patron names, but that's okay. I'll give you the funniest ones. We got a Ding Dongs, Hostess of the Yangzing. Has anyone actually read Toy Vendor? I used to play Rogue, but then my mom got a job. Is pretty good. Sonny stole my phone and took pictures with a Mo Yi body pillow. And then we've got Blackwing Silverwind the Ascendant is the best floodgate. Is probably one of the best ones we've had. And then there's Sakitama, Aratama, Nikitama, Cam, Obama. And Dragon Maidenless Behavior. Those are probably some of the funniest ones we got right now.
Good.
All right. Well, Roto, thank you very much for coming on to this episode of the podcast. Is there anything else you would like to say to the people before we sign off?
No, I think from everyone at the studio, Fluffle Octopus, good night.
It is a good night for Fluffle Octopus fans, and actually, it's interesting. I feel a sense of enlightenment after hearing the name Fluffle Octopus. And for those of you not watching the video, I have a copy of Apple of Enlightenment here, and I think that's the worst pun I've done on this show. So, thanks again to Roto for hopping on. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to follow us on Spotify or subscribe on YouTube. And yeah, have a great night, everybody.